All right, welcome back. Hey, so burnout is not a personal failure, it is a structural one. If everything in your organization feels urgent, unclear, or too heavy right now, you are not dealing with a people problem. You are dealing with a governance problem. Hi, I'm Nkoyo F. Young Lewis, possibility broker, attorney, strategist, and the creator of the Impact Triad Framework, your premier operating system for justice-focused, advocacy-focused nonprofits that want to deepen their impact without getting into trouble or burning out. Welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, this is our Governance in Real Time micro series. And this is a space where I help executive directors and board chairs strengthen culture, capacity, and compliance so they can lead with clarity instead of overwhelm. And in the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to show you how governance failures create decision fatigue, burnout, and capacity overload, and what you can do to break the cycle. So if you are tuning in here and you're feeling in this moment like, how are we supposed to keep moving? My team is tired. We're heading into the end of the year. There's a lot of closeout activities that are happening, all these holidays, giving season, all these things. While we're also in this weird sort of political environment that's antagonistic to nonprofits and feeling like, expectations continue to rise while resources dwindle. This session is for you, and my hope is that you will leave today, this end of our time together, with a clear understanding of where overwhelm is coming from and how you can intervene strategically. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, the first sign of a governance breakdown that tends to feel or get treated like capacity or a people problem are decision bottlenecks. And I know if you've been a part of this micro series for a while, I talk a lot about decision-making frameworks and how we are sometimes avoiding making the hard call because it's a hard call or it's uncomfortable. But what happens when you have these decision breakdowns and these bottlenecks at the executive director level, what we see is exhaustion, delayed progress, slow timelines, and a sense of constantly being on. Just like always having to keep moving, keep guessing, anticipating, forecasting, scenario planning, like all of these things. You're just constantly on. Your cortisol's probably through the roof. And it's simply just not sustainable. It's also not necessary. And with clear governance, it actually creates a system where we can distribute some of those decisions and not just centralize them. But like I said in other conversations, right, we also have to make sure we have the right people in the right seats who are understanding and clear on what their roles and responsibilities are so that they actually make the decision, they share the load, many hands make the work light. Which brings me to our breakdown number 2, which is undefined roles and responsibilities. When roles and responsibilities are unclear, everything becomes urgent because nothing is owned. So what you'll see is staff asking for constant approval, leaders doing work outside of their lane. Maybe your board is getting involved in things that they have no real business getting involved in. You have chaos disguised as flexibility. We make this decision today and we think, oh, well, tomorrow it might be something different. And so there's constantly shifting. And sometimes we think about that as being people first rather than undisciplined. And unmoored and untethered to our values. And then that also sometimes looks like tension between the board and the staff in terms of who's doing what, who should be doing, what our expectations are of what each is supposed to do. And so when we have this undefined roles and responsibilities, which also happens in the board, right? There are a lot of times when you get board chairs, board members, and you have a lot of people sitting on the board. And even though you might have a roles and responsibility sheet, hopefully, ideally you do, people not really understand or know what their roles are. And so you've got a lot of people stepping in and doing things and being involved in ways that they ultimately shouldn't be. I've definitely seen this where, especially if there is a leadership transition, which seeing a lot of posts with people saying, this is the end of their era, their time that they're doing something. And so, with the leadership transition, that transition, those friction points don't just pop up until the search is completed and you find someone new. There's going to be a new transition. There's going to be changes. There's going to be ways that things are done differently, different expectations that have to be managed. And when people are in those transitions, you might have a board step in more to different roles that they have to then turn back over, and you may end up with lots of side conversations, etc., that create more chaos and uncertainty and confusion. And so we want to make sure that we keep role clarity, because role clarity leads to capacity clarity. And that's ultimately the thing that we want to make sure is happening in all of the work that we're doing. The third breakdown that we'll see when we're getting to this place are sort of weak systems and processes. And again, I'm hoping this is starting to sound like a broken record, and that I'm being consistent in my delivery of communication with you around why governance matters. On Friday, our last live, we actually talked about the impact triad specifically, and how one of the legs of this triangle is capacity, and it's really focusing on people, processes, and partnerships and procedures. And so we really want to be making, and policies, we really want to be making sure that we're not just thinking about capacity in terms of dollars and people and hours worked, but we're actually building systems and processes that help us move the work forward. And this is especially true when it comes to decision making, which can often become a bottleneck because people, we talked about a couple days ago, don't necessarily want to be the one to make the decision, particularly if it's uncertain or unclear. There's no 100% foolproof way to make a decision. And so that's time we often see a lot of punting of things around. And so we want to make sure that we have stronger systems and processes so that decisions don't take so long. If communication has no structure, then suddenly everything is a meeting. I have worked with organizations where, again, a transition has happened, or, maybe an executive director or leader or someone in the team isn't working out as well, so they're leaning more for board support. And, these board members are meeting every single day to try to manage something that their system and the thoughtfulness around how they were going to oversee the organization and manage their executive director, having a better system for that could have prevented. We also see this internally inside with staff if workflows are unclear. And when those things are unclear, then everything feels like a fire, because now it's like, well, what's the priority? And all this other work is happening. This is my open tabs example. It's like we open a tab, we started here, and we open another tab, and soon we have 11 tabs open, and it's hard to figure out where to go back, what we need to do. And so we want to make sure that we are creating clarity for us in the way that we do the work. And most importantly, what we see when we have this breakdown in systems and processes is that it creates tired leaders. I mentioned this before, but sometimes we end up over-relying on people because we don't have strong systems and processes in place. And the real challenge of that is when burnout hits, when turnover happens, not only do we lose great people who unfortunately become sort of victims to the nonprofit industrial complex and this martyrdom thing where we're just going to work and sacrifice everything until it's completely unsustainable. But we also leave all of that knowledge and understanding and relationships and ability to get the work done. And so when we can remove some of those things from our mind or from over relying on one person and actually list it out and delegate it effectively, we can build a much more sustainable organization and actually enjoy our lives and do really great work, which might sound insane in terms of how nonprofits, especially those of us who are working to disrupt the status quo, to fight against injustices that are entrenched, to deal with very complicated systems that have for eons run the way that they have. The work itself is hard, but we can lighten the load by creating systems. I've mentioned that in other places, like I consult with businesses, for-profit, nonprofit, and a lot of times one of the things I help people do is actually take their knowledge of how things happen from their head and put it on paper so that we can decide who does what, whether there's technology that can help us do that work, whether, it makes sense that we're doing the work anyway, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it is the best, most efficient, most effective way to do it. And so sometimes being able to get all of that on paper and in front of people really helps organizations to be more thoughtful about how they spread the work, and sometimes even help people see how much work certain teammates are carrying. I think this is really great sometimes to help board members understand what the work is that goes on beyond just, the board report, the fact that the board report is in and of itself work and requires compilation, etc. Like, it's helpful to be able to name that and share and have a conversation around that, around what you all are doing day to day for people who are not in it day to day with you. I think this can be helpful too in ways that you can translate this into your impact reports and things that you're sharing with funders. But again, when we don't have strong systems and processes in place to do the things, it's hard to amplify them in the way that gets you the support that you need. So here's the truth, right? Burnout is not cured by self-care. I want to say that again, because I think whenever we have these things, it's like, oh, we'll take a break, like just rest, take a nap, go to the spa, go on vacation. I am a mother. I love to tell my husband, because he'll be like, oh, just take the time off. And I'm like, the thing is, the work doesn't disappear just because I took the time off. What happens is I take rest, I do the self-care thing, and all the work is still piling up with less time to do it, right? If you can relate, let me know in the comments. But sometimes that's also what happens when we have systems and structures that don't work. Even if someone takes a sabbatical, even if someone, takes a 3-day weekend, goes to the spa, goes to therapy, that doesn't mean that that will cure the self-care. Burnout is cured by structure. And we need to, generally in society, stop pretending that individuals can solve issues that are structural. And in the nonprofit space, this is one of those things that it's a hill I will die on, that some of this burnout, some of this exhaustion, a lot of this martyrdom that we experience here is because of poor structure. And some of that is inherited because of how laws, etc., have been set up, with this culture of, funders not wanting to fund overhead or operational or capacity building work, and really wanting to fund programs only and wanting to see dollar for dollar what the impact is, without understanding that this impact isn't created in a vacuum. And so, there are lots of really great critiques about the nonprofit structure and the way that we have forced people to solve really difficult problems with half the tools that our for-profit friends have. But outside of, the bigger structural issues that are there, we have to also look internally at the structure of what we are doing as organizations and leaders of organizations, and especially boards and senior leadership, because you have an opportunity to make those changes. So I named 3 real breakdowns that we see: decision-making bottlenecks, undefined roles and responsibilities, weak systems and processes. And I want you to think about which of these breakdowns is draining your team the most right now. I'd love for you to put it in the comments if you're live or watching the replay. But I really want you to think about this and assess which of these breakdowns is draining your team the most right now. Is it decision-making bottlenecks, unclear roles, or weak systems? And so if you're not sure, if you're like, hey, Inkoya, actually, it kind of feels like all 3, or I'm not really sure what's pulling me the most, I want you to ask yourself, when you think about decisions, who actually owns the decisions that keep landing on your desk? Is everything that you're getting or in your Signal chat or, your board group email, wherever it is, like who actually owns those decisions? And if we don't know, that might be a sign that decisions are a bottleneck that we need to address. If you're thinking about roles, is everyone on your team clear on what they are responsible for? And I think this is incredibly important because if you have onboarded people in the last 60, 90 days, 6 months, a year, like that might not be entirely clear. I think onboarding is probably one of the most crucial things that a lot of organizations don't invest enough time in, whether that's for-profit or non-profit. We're just like, did you see the job description? Great, come here for one day, look at these things. Here's all the documents, like get in there and make magic happen. And then we're like, they're not as helpful. They're not doing things. We have all these one-on-one check-ins that are passive-aggressive, sort of but it may be that there's a lack of clarity on where the responsibilities lie. If it's systems, are there processes for how work moves? Or is it all sort of improv? Like, it moves this way today, tomorrow it depends on, what a funder says or what a board member says or whether a staff member shows up to work. Like, is there a way that work moves? Do we have a replicable process that we get the work done? And whatever your answers are to these questions, and whatever one stings or sticks out to you the most, will reveal to you your next step. Last time we got together, I mentioned to you that your organization will let you know. It's screaming, it's calling out to you about where you need support. We just need to give ourselves some time and space to hear it. And so as we're sitting here now, I really want you to think about these 3 areas, right? With the decisions, roles, and systems, because that is going to shape where you focus as we move into 2026, a period of time where, we will need clear thinking, fast response, and strong leadership alignment. It's not going to be a nice to have. It is absolutely going to be a must have for organizations that are going to thrive in a very unstable political, socio-emotional, funding environment, period. So you cannot lead boldly with a burnt out team or collapsing structure. And so it is my goal, it is my hope to start shifting some mindsets into thinking about how we build these things in with the resources that we have. One of the lives that I'm going to do later is actually going to talk about your life cycle stage, like where you are and how you need to think about building and protecting and preparing your organization for 2026 based on that. I also would encourage you to, tap into Govern Audaciously, because we are going to spend more time really sort of thinking about what is necessary, what are people looking at, what are the gaps, the common gaps that are keeping most organizations up at night, and if they're not, things that you probably should be thinking about before we head into 2026, and also just concrete ways to better protect, prepare, and position yourself for 2026 and beyond. My goal is to help build more sustainable nonprofit organizations. And I don't love the term nonprofit. Technically all are tax-exempt organizations. And I think that you're in the business of social profits. Like, the work that you do benefits society at large. It's work, in my opinion, that the government should be doing in some areas. It's also places where private sector has left behind. And so you are really filling in the gap for a large subset of people and society at large. And so we need to make sure that you're able to do this in a sustainable way, especially as we see rising costs, inflation, unemployment, housing crisis, all these things that are happening at the same time. Your work is incredibly important here, and I absolutely want to be of support to you in building sustainably. And so if burnout or overwhelm is something that you are feeling in your shanana today, or your organization's shanana, this is your signal. And again, on December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern, I am teaching nonprofit leaders how to build structures that protect them from burnout and prepare their organizations for 2026. It is a completely free leadership briefing. All you have to do, the cost of entry is your time and attention. And so I hope you'll join me for Govern Audaciously, how to prepare, how to protect, prepare, and position your nonprofit for 2026. You'll see your girl loves an alliteration. Like, I love an alliteration. But anyway, let us strengthen your capacity and your leadership together. That is my quick take there. Again, my goal, if you would make sure that you really start to think about where is it that the bottlenecks or the issues are playing. Is this decision making? Is it roles? Is it systems? Because once we can pinpoint what those things are, we can be very specific on the tools to move it forward. So for example, if decision making is your issue, let's work on a decision making framework that actually allows people to understand when decisions will be made, how they will be made, and has clarity around that. If roles are an issue, we need to have stronger conversations about responsibilities and roles so that everybody is crystal clear on their lane and we can be marching in tandem in the direction that we want to go. And of course, if systems are your issue, baby, let's get together and build out the systems that will be sustainable for your organization. You may already have them in place, but let's actually put them in writing in front of everyone so that we can make sure that we have a replicable way to get the work done. I hope that today's live was helpful to you. I'd love to hear in the comments where you find your organization struggling, what's leading to the capacity challenges that you might be feeling today. And ultimately, I'd love to see you on Tuesday, December 2nd, so we can go a little bit deeper as we help you to build an organization that can withstand whatever is coming and has the true power and ability to change the world. Because we ultimately, absolutely, desperately need more change makers like you, building sustainably so that we can move into the future that we deserve. All right, with that, I hope you have a great night, and don't forget to go lead audaciously.